Good evening, everybody. We're back. Hey! I mean, how much did you miss seeing me? A lot, right? No, it's so good to be back. I know a lot of folks have been asking, when's the next Apologia? And it's so exciting to be back together again. I hope everybody had a great summer. With school starting, it just kind of feels like the main part of the year is in full motion, and Apologia is one of those parts, I think, of all of our calendars. Who here is this your first time to Apologia? Raise your hand real quick. Oh my goodness, this is awesome. Please give them a warm welcome. That's awesome to see so many folks who this is your first time. Well, if you've never been here before, get ready for a really engaging format. And what I mean by that is this is a 2-hour program at the top of the hour, so it's 6 o'clock right now. At 7 o'clock, we'll take like a 15-minute break so you guys can take a bathroom break and visit the booths. So the first hour will be a fireside chat between Pastor Alec and Pete Hegseth. And during that time, you'll have the opportunity to text your questions in. So if you could put that number up on the screen. So text your questions to 844-773-0530. We will collect those questions, and then during the break, we'll put those questions together for Pastor Alec and Pete. And the second hour will be about 45-50 minutes, and we'll actually tackle the questions that you have for both Pete and Pastor Alec. So looking forward to that. There are 3 awesome tables out in the lobby if you haven't seen them yet. First one, 40 Days for Life, so hopefully you stopped by there. 40 Days for Life is a local action group that wants to get involved in fighting for life and being involved in the community. They're obviously a pro-life group who want to offer a different way of life for these women who go to these planned pregnancies or Planned Parenthood centers, and basically just want to get involved in the politics as well with the decisions that are being made in local government. Number 2, I have to remember all of this, is Citizens for Education. I don't know about you, my wife and I are super blessed to send our girls to King's, but I look at the taxes I pay every year, and I see that I pay around $4,000 to Edmonds School District for kids to go to public schools, which is awesome. I'm a huge supporter of that. However, there's a lot that's going on in our public schools that I don't think many of us approve of, and unfortunately, there is no representation from us. I was talking to the group just before we started here, and they said an average school board meeting has less than 10 parents in the audience. Less than 10 parents in the audience. So I said, well, how much would it change the environment if you showed up with 5? They said it would shift the environment and shift the discourse of the questions that are being asked. The cool thing about Citizens for Education is maybe you're intimidated to go to a school meeting. Hand up, I've never been to a school meeting myself. As God is my witness, the next time you see me, I will have gone to a public school board meeting. The point is, what they do is they create a group to go together. So you don't have to say anything, you don't have to ask a question, simply your presence is what they're looking for. So if you've ever wanted to get involved, if you ever just wanted to see what goes on, what types of topics are being covered, go make sure to stop by this booth and get involved with your local school district. Speaking of schools and education, the main booth out here in the center is a group that we know and love, FPIW. They are sponsoring a Crisis in K-12 Education Edmonds Summit. This will be October 21st from 8:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. This will be here at Westgate Chapel, and there's a bunch of confirmed speakers of folks that are either state representatives or known local voices, subject matter experts. So if you're interested in what's going on in our K-12, what to do about it, what resources are available, how to do something about it, I think this is a related activity that I would encourage you all to get involved in. Now, we don't want to just talk the talk, we want to walk the walk. And it's my greatest pleasure to talk about this gentleman who is a member of our choir. Nick Jenkins heard the call that we hear in these apologias, and Nick Jenkins is running for Edmonds School District. Nick, shout out, what's your title? What are you fighting for? Yeah, superintendent, what is it? School board director. No. School board district, that's all that it says. Okay, so here's the deal. Can you tell that I'm not a subject matter expert? They just hire me to make jokes. But in all seriousness, Nick Jenkins is running for the Edmonds School District Board. And what's really cool is he's not only just somebody who loves the Lord and wants to get involved, but he's willing to debate about it. So September 28th at 5:30 at the Edmonds Waterfront Center, Nick, along with the two other primary candidates, are gonna have a debate off about what's going on in the Edmonds School District and who wants to do something about it. So Nick, I'm super proud of you. Nick, this is all for you. Look at this. So while I don't know if I can officially endorse Nick as a candidate, but I can say he's a friend. He loves the Lord. We sing together in choir, and he's an incredible man who stands for, let me read his main 3 bullet points, and this is a really long intro. The school's function is to assist children to develop strong literacy, math, and science skills so they can reason for themselves. A child's health care and sexuality are solely matters of private and parental concern and irrelevant in an academic setting. Finally, tax revenue is more than sufficient to develop strong literacy, math, and science skills in children. I mean, this is the truth. Lastly, the good news, Pete Hegseth is here. The bad news, we didn't get all the books. There are only 50 copies of this book available for sale. So be kind to your neighbor and gently nudge them out of the way during the break to go get this book. I would encourage you to pick it up. But you guys are here because obviously you're familiar with Pete. You've seen him on Fox News. Whether it's the battlefield, the media, Ivy League, or national politics, Pete Hegseth is a passionate fighter for America and the freedoms that we love. Pete is a decorated warfighter, Princeton and Harvard graduate, a veterans and military advocate, a highly acclaimed author, and now a Fox News host and political analyst. But above all else, he is a patriot and a believer. Can we give a warm welcome for Pete Hegseth and Pastor Alec?
Well, thank you for being here tonight. Welcome to everybody. We've been off for a few months due to some circumstances outside of our control, so I'm kind of excited to see you back tonight. Just a heads up for those of you who are new to the whole process of APOLOGIA. Really, right now, the news sources that are available to anybody have proliferated over the last 3 or 4 years. There are any number of places you can go for news and to keep up to speed on conservative biblical values. But I think the reason, so the question has come up internally, should we keep doing APOLOGIA? Is this meeting any kind of needs? No, I wasn't saying that for that, but thank you. But I said to my wife, Rita, driving here tonight, I think while a lot of these subjects that we addressed at first are now being addressed in multiple venues and multiple ways, it's not necessarily a lack of information for Pacific Northwest Christians, but coming together under the same roof in the same building to look around to each other and realize that we're not alone, we're not fighting this battle alone, and we really are in this thing to win it. And so we got to keep our eyes on the Lord and keep encouraging each other. Amen? The last time we were here with Pete, and before we jump into the interview, the last time we were here, we spent almost all the time talking about the battle for the American mind and the book that he had published. And we're gonna start there again tonight with public education. But we thought to sort of get our minds in the right place for this discussion, we would play you a little clip of Senator John Kennedy, who recently at a Senate, and don't worry, it's bleeped out, but in a recent Senate subcommittee hearing on the book banning was the whole issue. He was addressing one of the books that he found in a public library. So let's roll that clip just to get ourselves ready for this discussion. And you wonder why people are saying, get your kids out of public school. If there are people like this purveying this kind of material in our public schools, that's why. So Pete, welcome back. Thank you for being a champion of this whole subject and for bringing it up in your first book, Battle for the American Mind. Can we just start telling us, the audience about something you discussed, the struggle that you've had with distributors in this book?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Pastor, thank you so much for having me. What an honor it is to be here with all of you. Beautiful country, and your team won this afternoon. And you beat my Lions, which helps me in the NFC Central. I'm a Vikings guy. I am so heartened by this gathering, what this church is doing. Churches, my home church, we live in Tennessee now, but we went to church in New Jersey for about 5 years, and my home church is starting to do this too. Churches need to stand up inside the culture. Of course, what happens on Sundays and Wednesdays and in Bible studies is critically important and shapes us and our families, but our culture is crying out in a spiritual battle. We're in the middle of spiritual warfare, and churches for too long have abdicated that. And so when I see pastors who are taking that leadership position, I commend you. And I appreciate all of you for standing behind him and standing behind this church as well. It's kind of funny, I was in my office. My wife also works at Fox. We were sitting in our office and we were talking with somebody else and we heard that beep in the background. We're going, something's wrong with the TV. That is one example of many that we point to in the book, and also I think we're going to talk a little bit about the Fox Nation series, Miseducation of America. We have a second part that addresses topics a lot like that. But yeah, this book, Battle for the American Mind, it was providential that I had the opportunity to work with David Goodwin, my co-author on the book. He's the president of the Association of Classical Christian Schools. It's a growing association that has really rediscovered what education properly understood should look like. And our hope for the book was that it would motivate people and expose what education looks like in America. I just talked to David a couple of days ago. He said, Pete, our schools are exploding. We used to have 5 to 10 a year that would be planted. We've had over 100 in the last 2 years, each year since the book has come out, because people have seen that. So glory to God. It is all for him and his purpose. But actually, I'll be honest, I knew our paperback was coming out. This is the first one I've seen. and I'm the author. Honestly, it is. So apparently the paperback's on sale. I had no idea. But I also got an email from our publisher just 3 days ago, sitting in my office, and it jumped right off the page because it exceeded all of our wildest prayers and hopes for the book. The Battle for the American Mind when did it come out? It came out May of 2022. In the last year, it became the #1 hardcover education book in America in the last 20 years. 20 years. Which is, beyond humbling. It's a small contribution to, so many have written so much more with so much more significance. But it caught on because I think it struck a chord with what everyone was feeling, especially after COVID. How in the world did this happen? I'm seeing my kids' classroom now on a Zoom screen, or my grandkids, and I'm seeing utter lunacy. I'm seeing 1776 is gone and it's 1619 now. And I'm seeing gender pronouns and gender theory that shouldn't even belong in universities in my elementary school. And it was all hidden from me before. And where did this come from? And what the book tries to do is lay out, this is not accidental. This is not a product of just the last couple of years or a few radicals having, this is a over 100-year intentional project by atheist, Marxist progressives to create a school system that gave them a certain outcome that made kids and future citizens easier to control for their utopian schemes. And we can break down any aspect of it that you want, but even with the success that the book has had, my co-author and I traveled a lot when the book was out. It spent 14 weeks on the New York Times list, 4 weeks at #1. And you know when you go through the airport and it's got the New York Times bestsellers in the airport, not one time was our book on that shelf. It was #1 for 4 weeks. You go to a Barnes & Noble right now, I dare you to find a copy of Battle for the American Mind, because you can't find it. Thank goodness for Walmart and Costco, who sold crate loads of them, and Amazon. So yes, you can order it and get it delivered, but even the distributors of it, you'd think they'd be capitalists who want to sell a lot of books. I go into a bookstore, it's never in the front, it's in the back, bottom part of a shelf somewhere. But it has resonated with the hearts and minds of Americans who, the premise of the book was the first step to recovery is understanding the depth of your problem. So let's help people get rid of the convenient excuses that we all have as to why the school we send our kids to is gonna be okay, that Johnny's gonna be just fine. And I come from a background of public educators. I went to public school. I believe in that premise. But once you see what they've done, you can't unsee it. And then the challenge of the book is the next question of, well, what next? What will you do as a parent or a grandparent to say, other than introducing my kids to their Lord and Savior and bringing them to church, and other than the environment that I provide for them at home, where I send them to school will have the most formative impact on who they become as human beings. And as members of this republic in this country, what kind of citizens they will be in this republic. And the left has counted on that, and they have captured that. And it's time that we take it back. And so the book charts a battle plan for an educational insurgency that has begun, that I think we should do everything we can to be a part of.
Was the first video series, The Miseducation of America, was it based, that was on Fox Nation, released over a year ago, was it based on that book?
Yes, so they were tied together. In fact, it was a bit of a struggle to get it on Fox Nation, and that's not to disparage Fox Nation, but a lot of people there for a while said, education series, that sounds boring. And it ended up being one of the most popular series we've ever done on Fox Nation. And we didn't hold back one bit. And so I don't know which idea came first, to be honest with you. I think it was the book, and then we said, let's make it a film series as well, because the subtitle is Uprooting a Century of Miseducation, which we used. So if you have Fox Nation, it's a 5-part series, Miseducation of America, where we lay out basically the premise of the book, what the progressives did, who the main characters are. You meet those main characters to a man and to a woman over the last 100 years, and I'm not saying this hyperbolically. They're humanists, socialists, atheists, Marxists. These are the people who crafted the modern government schools, because that's what they are, they're government schools, system that we see today. So what came out since we spoke last is The Miseducation of America Part 2, which is another 5-part series, and we really break down the origins of sex ed to kind of get to where Senator Kennedy is talking about. There's an episode about sex ed, which then morphs into the second episode about gender studies and gender theory, the twisted things that are being taught now. I mean, if you can convince a 6 or a 7-year-old that there are not men and women, there are not boys and girls, you've effectively captured the entire lens through which they see the world. I mean, it goes back to the garden, and they can deconstruct every part of how they see their relationship with God, how they see their relationship with their family, kids turning on families. That's the whole point. And then the third episode is about standards. It's unbelievable how intentional the dumbing down of the American mind has been. And from getting rid of phonics and the whole word method to standards and testing, it's been an intentional assault. All the educators have seen the metrics of reading and math go down, and yet they've doubled and tripled down on their failed strategies. And now, of course, anything that doesn't work it doesn't work because it's racist. Everything is racist, and so it all needs to go out the window. And the fourth episode's about unions, teachers' unions, one of the most powerful political blocs in our country that represent to defend themselves, or they exist to defend themselves and represent themselves, not the interests of kids. And then the fifth episode is it's basically a solution episode. Here are people doing it right. Here's Classical Conversations, which is a classical homeschooling network that, if you add it all up across America, is the 15th largest school district in America, run by Lee Bortons. It's phenomenal, and it is crafting a generation of young kids who are getting a real classical education. Other classical schools, Charlie Kirk and what he's working on in schools across the nation. There is hope there. You just have to help people understand how the status quo is going to ruin the minds of their kids.
One of the things I remember you addressing last time you were here, which I thought was really significant, is that you even felt like some of the Christian schools have curriculum, if they're not careful in the selection of the curriculum. Some of the Christian schools have curriculum inadvertently influenced. I remember during the intermission, the last time you was here, my daughter Vanessa, who has a master's in education, went up and threw 3 or 4 books away that she'd studied at a Christian university.
You said some of the Christian schools. I would say most of the Christian schools. I'm talking universities. Most Christian schools are just nominally Christian in their title and have become the same woke universities as everybody else. This is not to indict schools that have kept God in them and at the core, and that's a beautiful and wonderful thing. But almost all of the premises upon which modern education is based in K through 12 is progressive. And so if you said, I'm going to open a Christian school, and you invite God and you have chapel and you talk about God in school, that's a good thing, a great thing. But it doesn't mean that most of what you're teaching inside the classes aren't already captured by progressives, which is fundamentally true. Who here took social studies in school? Me? I did. Social studies, made up by progressives. It was not a subject 80 years ago, 70 years ago. They got rid of individual subjects like literature, like civics, like philosophy, like theology, like geography, and they meld them all together into something called social studies, where you study people and it eventually devolves into cultures, and then you decide what culture is more important or not, and it becomes a science, a social science, as opposed to an individual discipline, all of which, when they were understood by our founders, were a reflection of God and his kingdom and his glory, and you could see goodness and beauty and truth through those individual disciplines. Intentionally dumbed it down into something that was sort of a watered down look at humans and over time, over culture with some history in there. And I didn't know any better, and social studies was my favorite subject growing up. I'm like, but we used to study civics, we used to study the Constitution, we used to study our form of government, we used to study church history of what we believe. These were things that were front and center to Western civilization. By creating something like social studies, It all gets dumbed down, and then the teachers insert whatever latest philosophy they want inside of that. And that's why you see very little history, no theology, very little civics being taught in our schools. That's the kind of assumption that Christian schools adopt inside their curriculum that we have to throw out the window, because it was meant to distract from subjects that for 2,000 years underwrote what Western civilization represented. And that's why I'm such a fervent advocate of classical Christian education. It's a rediscovering of the lost tools of learning that were intentionally buried by progressives. They almost outlawed homeschooling in the 70s. There were no classical Christian schools in the 70s. I would argue that was the darkest days of American K through 12 education. Even though you didn't have the radical indoctrination you have today, they'd almost totally smothered it. And then some very courageous Christians went out and said, let's rediscover how they did it. And it's not easy. It's not easy to find teachers, because every teacher has been through the same educational pipeline, and the left still controls all of those pipelines. So it's a lot of deprogramming. But when your kid walks into a school like that, I remember my first reaction after observing it firsthand. I just sat there and go, why didn't I learn any of this? I don't know any of this. I don't know my own story as a speck in Western civilization. I don't understand how what we do today is tied to revolutions of the past that failed or didn't fail, or courageous moments that were taken inside the church to reform it or to defend it, that are directly tied to where we sit today in the United States of America. It gives you an identity other than the identities we serve kids today, which is take the phone and point it back at yourself. We're part of something so much bigger, and we've robbed kids of that story. And so I think it's not just enough to put God in the school. You've got to reorient how we educate kids as well.
So good, so good. When you were here last, you were on your way, if I remember, to Scottsdale, Arizona, I think, to either launch or record either the next series of the Miseducation of America, or maybe it was an episode. I wasn't clear about that. But
I went down to go to one of Charlie Kirk's schools down there in Arizona that they're starting, and then others they're expanding, yes.
So what have you discovered since you were here last time that would be in addition to some of the things that you shared with us last time?
Yeah, I mean, in season 2, in episode 1, when you look at, I don't know if you've heard the name Alfred Kinsey, the Kinsey Institute. When you look at the people who peddled the origins of sex ed, the sex ed that all of us took. My dad was a high school gym teacher. He taught sex ed, which is really awkward for me to think about. But he taught sex ed like in the 80s and 90s in a suburban/rural Minnesota high school. I know my dad wasn't peddling radical theories. He wasn't suggesting, sex acts or the types of things that were talked about by Senator Kennedy. He's talking birds and bees and basics, right? I mean, but that's how they got their nose under the tent of the idea that sex is a topic that should be discussed at all inside our public schools by a stranger without the parents' input. And so but the origins of it were peddled by pedophiles, by child rapists, and by terrible people who had sick and twisted ideas of sex, performed fake and false experiments about it, many of which were on infants and young children, with other pedophiles, many of which were released from jail or involved in sexual and criminal activity. And then they put it all in a book, called it Research and Studies, and there was almost no critical feedback or rejection of it inside educational circles, and then it just grew and grew. And then you get groups like Planned Parenthood, who we think of as, for their horrific and sinful acts on abortion, but they're one of the biggest purveyors of sexual curriculum in America today. And so the origins of the gender and sexuality things we see today are part of the way the left operates in so many areas. They start with something that parents barely bat an eye at, or is up here in academia in a theoretical sense, and slowly but surely they work to push it into lower and lower levels, because they're not satisfied with colleges and universities, which is why this book is intentionally targeted to K through 12. And it introduces a word we talked about last time that I won't belabor, but it's a word called paideia, which is a lost Greek word that we don't study Latin and Greek anymore. But it has no direct English translation, but its translation is roughly the enculturation or education of our youngest. What we imprint on the souls of our kids is the vision of the good life. Who are we? What do we love? What do we revere? What do we worship? Most of that is learned before you're a teenager. The left, our founders understood that. We had a Western Christian paideia for generations. Well, the left identified the power of paideia. That's why they started the moderns, from Robert Owen to Horace Mann to across the board. They targeted paideia and said, we want to create schools for the youngest. And that's why things like gender pronouns, things like am I a man or a woman, are being pushed lower. I mean, the state of New Jersey, where we fled from, now has mandatory gender theory studies across all subjects all the way down to first grade. Minnesota, my other former home state, now has mandatory CRT-based ethnic studies in every subject, mandatory in a couple of years, starting in first grade. They will not stop until the vision of the world of our youngest, that lens, is shaped at the youngest of levels. Because once you get them to identify that, well, if I'm white, I'm inherently oppressor, or if I'm black, I'm inherently oppressed, or I don't know what a man and a woman is, that is, you've got them, first of all, you're lying to them, now they're lying to themselves, and then they believe that lie. And that lie becomes the prism through which they see the entire world. And now you don't just have students, you have indoctrinated students, and then you have future activists. And ultimately, minds who are not shaped to think reasonably or critically, which makes them a lot easier to control later on as a voter bloc. And that's why standards don't really matter to the other side. So we dove really deep into sex ed and gender studies in that next series because it started with the CRT 1619 stuff. Do you remember after COVID, that's kind of where it started? And then it really quickly went into this gender and sexuality stuff almost immediately. It's because it was all under the surface ready to percolate. And they thought now was the time they could come out of the tall grass and expose themselves for who they are.
Do you think conservatives are making any progress at all? Where do you see glimmers of hope?
Oh, I do. I mean, when you read this and you watch the miseducation, you will be depressed, and you should. I mean, you will. That was the intent, is to jar people to say, like, don't make excuses. Don't pretend like it's not there. Don't say, oh, my school's okay, or I know my principal, he's a good guy, or my teacher of my kid's second grade class, she's a Christian, so I'm good. Well, that's good, but he or she is still operating underneath a system and a prism where they basically have to be closeted with their beliefs and maybe slip something in. They're working inside a system that fundamentally hates them. But I think a reckoning has come because people have recognized it. First of all, they're choosing in record numbers alternate forms of education. It's still a drop in the bucket compared to the yellow school bus crowd, which is still, I don't say that demeaningly, it's just a reality. The biggest transportation system in America is public schooling. And I think about that when I drive to my kids' school and I drive by 4 massive public middle schools and high schools. I mean, those are still the bedrock of how kids are educated in this country, and they're completely lost. And we live in Tennessee, in a red area of Tennessee. I talk to parents in that county, in our county, and in Sumner County, and they say, you would not believe what's in our schools. So it's not as if you can just move your way out of this problem. The unions are ubiquitous. I mean, I know you guys have it bad up here, but you can't just move and say, okay, now we're good. It's shades of radicalism all along the same spectrum. And so the book was intended to wake people up. I do think the school choice movement gives me a lot of hope that an issue like education is moving to the forefront and a recognition of its importance inside the political discourse. And the last time we had a candidate that really talked about education, even if it was not, holistically, was probably George W. Bush. And then 9/11 happened, and that all, our whole world changed. To hear presidential candidates running in 2024 put education front and center, to watch a governor in Virginia win on that issue front and center, is really, really encouraging. And you're seeing state legislatures across the country pass full-on school choice, meaning the dollars follow the kids, to include private and religious instruction. That is the way it should be. It should not be the default that your dollars go to the local public school. They should go to the parent and follow the kids where they go. And that's when a movement like this of classical Christian schooling can explode, because there's the tuition dollars there for people who can't otherwise afford to spend $8,000 or $10,000 or $12,000 a year on a school for their kids or their grandkids. So we're building the base so that when that happens in those states, even a state like Tennessee doesn't have universal school choice. That's something, God-fearing conservatives and others should be fighting for, so that you can liberate minds of kids and break through from those parents and grandparents who get it now to others who say, hey, if I have a choice, I'll choose something else. They're just not actively looking for it right now. So I am hopeful. Sometimes in the darkest days, that's when you get to see the glimmer of light, and it's definitely out there. And it's a lot of Christians doing a lot of amazing work in this country.
But you're still comfortable telling Christian families to get their kids out of public school?
Unequivocally, anything you can do, get your kids out of government schools. And I say that without hesitation, without an asterisk. I know there are some people that cannot, and I understand that. And in that case, your new part-time job is overseeing everything that they do, everything that they learn, and everything they interact with. Because it's not even just schools that we're dealing with now. It's that portal that sits in their hand. And every day that goes by, my kids are getting older before they get their hands on one of them. It's just because there's only so much we can do to fortify them and prepare them for this world that is full of so many sick and twisted ideologies. So if you can't, your part-time job is to protect them. But I just think of how you use disposable income. Is it a vacation? Is it an upgrade on a car? Is it, all the ways in which we spend money on things that we appreciate? If forming the minds of your kids is that important, or your grandkids, there are probably ways most of us can find a way to do the best we can to scrape it up to find a better alternative. I think that's more important than most of the priorities that a lot of us have.
Pastor Vanessa and I had this very conversation with the president of Christa, which is a huge Christian ministry here in the North Seattle area with multiple ministries. Yeah, let's give God thanks for Christa Ministries. They have radio stations, they have nursing homes, and they have King's schools. Our grandkids go there. But the conversation was very encouraging to me, because it sounded like even folks who are in charge of Christian schools are recognizing that the budget of putting your kids in a Christian school is out of reach for some believers. There have been stories told, however, I probably shouldn't let this out, where a young family happened to have more than 3 or 4 grandparents, and got the grandparents in the same room and said, here's what it's going to cost to put your grandchildren in Christian school, and how much are you going to pony up, and how much are you going to pony up? That's just a thought, as speaking as a grandparent who hasn't been approached yet, but honestly, Jacinta Tegman, the CEO, was talking to us about, is there potential, very much in the talking stage, but is there potential for a church like Westgate and other larger churches to be in partnership with large Christian schools, as whether it looked like a satellite, or whether we start small and add, we already have preschool through kindergarten, but do we add 1 year first grade, and the next year's, how does the church, we can't just jump right in the middle of it. But most churches have facilities, right? And what can we do to make it more affordable for those who just can't afford Christian school tuition?
I love that. The reality is the church used to effectively be the primary schoolhouse before we allowed the government to come in and take over. And when the government did, what did the church get in the business of? The church got in the business of Sunday school, as if 1 hour on Sunday was going to make up for the 40 hours in the middle of the week that we've just now handed over to the state. It used to be the function of church to follow through on that education. And I think the rediscovery of that for churches is going to be it's the only way you scale something like this. And too many pastors are, and I've had this conversation with my pastor in New Jersey, and he's phenomenal on it now. But there's a hesitation to stand in front of your congregation, and you're looking at parents and grandparents, and you're trying to tell the truth without impugning them. Because I'm not looking at anybody out here and saying you're a bad parent or you're a bad grandparent because your kids were in public school or they are in public school. I'm not here to offend you. I had the same assumptions for a very long time. But now we know what's happening. And if you don't have the resources, can churches partner with schools, even on scholarship funds, to help members of that church send their kids to 3 or 4 schools you've identified in the community that are in keeping with the values of that church? I do think that is a ministry of a church that's going to have a lot more payback. I mean, I love that my kids come back from Sunday school and they know a little bit more about Moses. But now they go to a school where they understand the entire history of the Old Testament and how it ties to Jesus' fulfillment of that. And then, oh, by the way, that thing called the Crusades that were like really important and we wouldn't be here without them, they'll talk about it. I mean, that's all gone from history books in our schools. It's all gone. It's like a giant blank period of thousands of years that they just wash over. And churches lost their way. And I think if we don't wake up now, then what are we in the business of doing?
Yeah. Pray to the Lord it's not too late.
That's right.
Yeah. Any thoughts? We got so much else to cover, but it's hard to get away from the subject of our kids, because I totally agree with you. If we don't invest in our kids, beyond the hour and a half they were in church on Sunday morning, if we don't invest in them, then we've lost the next generation. Is there several Republican presidential candidates have talked about abolishing the Department of Education. What do you think? Do you think that's realistic? Is it just blowing smoke? What do you think about it? And what good would it do?
It'd be great. In fact, part of my work in the series, you'll see we actually interviewed Ron DeSantis on it. And in his first time I asked him, he kind of hesitated. And then I asked again, and he's like, yes, I would abolish it. I mean, it should be enthusiastically, absolutely, we will tear down the Department of Education. It is a completely union-controlled, left-wing pipeline of Marxism. That's what it is. And Republicans have been scared of that topic forever because they're accused of, if you get rid of the Department of Education, you're somehow anti-education. Of course, that is how the media will frame the entire discussion. I think, thankfully, we're getting to a point where enough people realize that education is off the rails, that it isn't the political third rail that it was before. I mean, Ronald Reagan wanted to abolish it, never did. And if you look at the nexus of, and the book dissects this, you look at the nexus of the Department of Education, it was Jimmy Carter's giveaway to the unions because he was the first presidential candidate they had ever endorsed, the teachers' unions, at the '76 convention. They had half the delegates for the Democrats. And the head of the NEA brags in the Washington Post, there is no education department without the NEA, without the teachers' unions. It's just an extension of existing teachers' unions that are just an extension of one political party that has one particular point of view. And all they've done over the years with candidates, with presidents, Republican and Democrat, by the way, have usurped states' rights and federalism to create more federal control of education. Which is why I salute everyone who runs for school board. Was Nick out here who's running? Good on you. Like, that's incredibly important that we have Christians standing up and because there are things you can do locally to head off the flood of insanity. But ultimately, most school boards just take the marching orders from the State Board of Ed, which take their marching orders from the Federal Department of Education, and the money flows and no one disrupts it. And you can make some changes on the margins with a superintendent or a principal here or there, but they have worked very hard through No Child Left Behind and every single, what was the one before that? I can't remember, Common Core, all of them to push the money and the expectations from Washington into your kid's desk. And as a result of controlling all that, they control the way things are taught. So yes, it should be abolished. It should be abolished unapologetically. I love what Vivek Ramaswamy is saying about the size of the federal government being severely reduced. And frankly, that's why they're so afraid of Donald Trump, is that if he won in 2024, he knows where the bodies are buried, he knows how Washington works, and I don't think he's gonna have a problem taking on things like this. Now, I think if I had one criticism of Trump, and I've said this before, like he wasn't very strong on education. I think he was behind the curve on it. They tried the 1776 commission right at the very end when they saw the nonsense coming, but that was never enough to stem the tide. This should be a top priority of 1,000 priorities any incoming president would face.
The issues seem to be so systemic that we probably need a battle on multiple fronts at the same time, right?
I think we should move all the departments out of Washington to really anywhere else, but where they're most pertinent. So you could take the Interior Department and move it to a state park in the Southwest somewhere, or take the Education Department and move it to Oklahoma or Tennessee, or something, where it's outside of the grip of the power bases in Washington physically, and it's not gonna solve everything. You should get rid of it altogether, but it's so much power concentrated in one place, and they wield it with a lot of power.
So while we're trying to get Nick Jenkins into the Edmonds School Board, we also need to pull our kids out if they're in public education and be parents that go to the board and speak up on, do everything that's possible at this point in these issues.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, because I don't want to stand up here and say, let's abandon the 98% of Americans who go to public schools. You can't win the future of the view of our country. We're literally teaching. We are in such uncharted territories, it's mind-boggling. We are about to pump out a generation, already are, of kids who don't know if they're a man or a woman, and they think America's a terrible country. Like, how do you keep a country when you're pumping out a generation that's taught to hate the country? And they're taught to hate each other and not know who they are. It is absolutely uncharted territory and extremely dangerous. And right now, we better find the 1 or 2 or 3% that's fortified. And that starts with our kids and grandkids, and give them the education they never got, and then do the best we can to save as many others as we can.
Yep, exactly. So let's jump subjects. We've got about 15 minutes left before the break. And when we come back from the break, I'm gonna ask Pete about Fox News. So you don't wanna miss being back. But before we go on the break, give us a little background of your own military. I want to go to the condition the world is in, because we've noticed, those of us that do watch Fox News have noticed that your role seems to be morphing into a variety of places where you're being asked to give commentary. Your background in the military uniquely suits you to maybe comment on where the military is right now. So just tell us a little bit about where you've served and how long you served.
Yeah, we're not, my next book is actually coming out next year. It's called Battle for the American Military. And it's about not how the military went woke, but how the military allowed itself to go woke. And we're not stopping on this project. My co-author's actually writing another book called Battle Plan, which is basically a toolkit for parents and grandparents about how you can start a school, how you can actually do it. And so I'm gonna work with him on that too. So the education front's not done.
When's it coming out?
I don't know when his is coming out exactly, but mine, middle of next year sometime. And it's a different kind of book. This is a little bit more academic. Mine's gonna tell my personal story in the military, which is no more special than anybody else who's served in the last 20 years, but I think is telling of what has happened, especially under Obama, and then in hyperspeed under Biden, inside the only real remaining meritocracy inside the federal government and in American society, which is why it's such a problem for the left. They need to destroy that too. So I joined in 2001. ROTC. The towers fell a few months later. It was a validator for me. I went to infantry school, became an infantry officer. I was in Guantanamo Bay for a year guarding 700 detainees that we'd pulled off the battlefield with my platoon. Was in Iraq the year later with the 101st Airborne as an infantry platoon leader. I was in Samara when the Golden Dome was blown up by Al-Qaeda. My job was to work with the local government in Samara. I was a senior counterinsurgency instructor in Afghanistan in 2011 and 2012. So basically, our job was to analyze the enemy and the nature of the Taliban and help units coming in understand what counterinsurgency looked like and how insurgencies are effective or not effective. And then I was in the National Guard, actually, when the DC riots happened in the summer of 2020. I found myself carrying a riot shield as an infantry major outside the White House in Lafayette Park with BLM and Antifa those 3-4 nights when there was the mass riots in Washington, D.C. Remember, they effectively breached the grounds of the White House. I was there the next day, and then the 3 nights following that. But remember, they took over Lafayette Square, tried to torch it, and they injured dozens of Secret Service officers. Like, this was a real assault on the White House because, Trump. And ultimately, as I'll tell the full story in the book, I was not allowed to guard so then January 6th happened. I'm in the DC National Guard, and I was not allowed to guard the Biden inauguration. That's the job of the DC National Guard. You remember after January 6th, there were 25,000 troops in Washington, D.C. Everybody who could walk and had camouflage was supposed to be there guarding the Capitol. And I got a phone call, and I'll detail this in the book, but I got a phone call from an officer in the DC Guard saying, your orders are revoked, you're not needed. And I was like, excuse me? Everyone's going, and I'm a major, and I'm qualified, and I have orders, and they wouldn't tell me why. And then, of course, when I was writing this book and I reached back out to some people I know in the unit, they said, you were identified as an extremist. I'm not kidding. I spent 20 years in uniform, or over a 20-year span in uniform, and somehow I was not trusted to defend the inauguration of Joe Biden because I was seen as a domestic extremist. And I think you sign up to fight radical Islamic extremists, and then you end up being one in the eyes of your own government. And it's just emblematic of how moments were used by the Defense Department to push views on who should be serving and who shouldn't. And so add that on top of COVID and vaccine mandates, add that on top of critical race theory, which is now being pushed from the highest level of our military, from Milley to Austin to everybody else, to the ending of Don't Ask, Don't Tell that led to women in combat, that led to now transgender affirming care. You can now sign up in the military specifically to transition, which is a medical condition, and you're combat ineffective for a year, and your unit has to keep you on the books while you can't do PT, you can't do your job, and then you could just leave the military with your transition in hand if you want to. We've totally lost our mind with no lodestar of the Constitution or readiness, and that's why you see recruiting numbers dropping so dramatically. The Air Force is going to miss by 7,000 recruits. The Army's missing by 15,000. I could tell you stories all day of guys I served with who just said, I'm done. If I have to go through another briefing like this where I'm told that as a white officer, I have implicit bias toward the men I served with, who I served with in combat, who I love like brothers, who I never saw them as a racial identity, and now you're telling me that's how I should see them. They're doing to the military what they've done in higher education. And military academies, same thing. They're bringing in civilian professors to teach at the military academies, which used to be reserved largely for officers because it's a military academy. And they bring the same radical views into West Point and Annapolis that they did everywhere else. And you've got generals who are not held to standards, who are basically politicians with stars, and they know they can get promoted if they do the things at the behest of the White House. And Donald Trump did what he could, but effectively it all laid under the surface for 4 years, waiting for him to go so they could keep fast forwarding with their transition to the military. So it's not a book I want to write, and I grapple with the question at the end, like, do I want my kids serving in the military? And I'm still grappling with that because Whereas the battlefield of the American mind is a 100-year takeover, and you can kind of retreat from that and find an alternate form of education for your kids in the near term. Like, what do we do if we retreat from the military? What is our next option if we lose that institution? And so a retreat looks really bad and kind of feeds into what they want. And it's going to be one of the top jobs of a next president, to fire a bunch of generals, clean house, and change the way we create leaders in the military.
Can we begin with Millie?
Oh, yeah. That's an easy one, yeah. Absolutely begin with Millie. I mean, and I know a lot of guys that served with Millie and had good things to say about him. I think he was a colonel on 9/11, deployed, but you get to a certain point in your military career and, 2 stars, 3 stars, 4 stars. And either you put your stars on the table and say, I'm not gonna be complicit in this, or you get along to go along with political prerogatives. And he's clearly made his choice. And you look at the statements he made after the riots that I was at outside the White House, where he almost resigned after when Trump went out with the Bible and said, we're not gonna allow a church to be burned outside the White House. We're gonna push these people back, and we're gonna be strong, and lawlessness doesn't. He almost resigned, wrote some letter that he never gave him about how Trump's a fascist and a racist and all this stuff, and then gave an interview to somebody where he said to Michelle Obama on Biden's inauguration, no one's smiling more than me today. I mean, he's got a particular political view, which is fine, but he's allowed himself to decide that he knows better than civilian leadership. And a great example we were talking about in the back was when he shared the fact that he was giving warning to our communist Chinese friends about whatever action Donald Trump might take. Not your job, Millie. Also, Lloyd Austin. And by the way, the guy they're going to replace Millie with, way worse.
Wow. So when we hear, and I forget who it was now, the spokesman for the State Department, absolutely denying the rumor that we left billions of dollars of military hardware in Afghanistan. Is there any accountability? I mean, that we saw, most of us who watched the news back then, saw the rows and rows of equipment being left behind.
No, it's just an abject lie. And they spin it even to this most recent 2-year anniversary, the most successful airlift in American history. No, that's their lie. People got awards inside the Pentagon for the most successful airlift in American history. You talk to anybody that tried to get people out of Afghanistan, the State Department was an absolute disaster. I had dinner last night with my interpreter, Sabur, who was my interpreter in Afghanistan. He lives in upstate New York today. Unbelievable guy. And we helped get his brother Habib out of Abbey Gate in one of the last few. His family was beaten, he was beaten. And I went and rewatched a segment we did on Fox and Friends about that after he had arrived home. And there was no plan. There was no process. It was complete abandonment. From the State Department's processes were a joke because there was no process. And military advice that was given or ignored was something you would expect from a JROTC cadet. Like, let's abandon Bagram Air Force Base, the most strategic asset we have in the area. Let's evacuate the military before we evacuate the civilians. Let's rely on the Taliban for our external security. Let's not give snipers the opportunity to fire on targets that we think we've identified as potential suicide bombers. And then after we've lost 13 brave Americans, let's drone some car we think is the guy who did it, but it's actually an aid worker and his family. Let's run flights out while people are clinging to planes. Every part of it was embarrassing. Every part of it was a stain on our nation, a stain on our military leadership. And yet nobody resigned. No one threw their stars on the table. No one was fired. And the only guy who was fired was Stu Scheller, a Marine lieutenant colonel who made a video saying, how dare they conducting, and they targeted him because no one's allowed to speak that way. Stu had the courage to speak when others would not. And look at what's unfolded in the world ever since. So watch what happens in Afghanistan. Let's go for Ukraine, or next, let's go for Taiwan. And it's a reflection of weakness. We know Joe is weak. Our institutions look weak. Our military fails in a 20-year project. And that's another reason why people don't want to join the military. And I could tell story after story about rules of engagement, about tying the hands of warfighters. One of the best stories Donald Trump tells is about ISIS. When he took over and he met Raisin Cain, the guy that he met over there, and he said, I can do it in 3 weeks. And when you untie the hands of your warfighters, ISIS is gone in 3 weeks. Because it turns out we got a pretty bleeping good military. And when you let them do their job, and they're focused on warfighting and lethality and readiness and stacking bodies of bad guys. Like, that's what we're really good at. But like trying to pick this or apologize for that or tap dance around, humanitarian missions, that's when things go sideways.
Wow. I'd like to explore that some more, right? Let's take a break. Take advantage. We got a 10-minute break. We're getting your questions that you're texting in. We will include those when we come back. And here's some more from Pete Hegseth. Would you join me in just thanking him for being here tonight?
See you in a minute. Thank you.
And we're back. Hey, there's so many people in the lobby that they're not gonna wanna come back unless they think something really exciting is going on. So can you just cheer really quickly? Oh my goodness, so much fun in here. You gotta come back. You gotta come back. Look at them all scurrying from the bookstore. This is great. Can you tell I really love this gig? I'd do it for free. I don't care. Speaking of, Pastor Alec, I know you can hear me. We need to have a discussion about grandparents sponsoring tuition at King's schools with Mr. Jordan Gage. That would be incredible to have some help. A couple of things I wanted to cover before we bring our guests back out. One really important piece is I hope you guys are blessed by Pete. I thought that was an incredible hour. I feel like this is the first Apologia that should go 3 hours. That said, this program is totally self-funded by the giving of people like you. This is not a budgeted program within the body of Westgate Chapel. It's an incredible ministry that was birthed out of kind of the COVID period. And so I just wanted to make sure that we put up the giving slide. I would ask you all to prayerfully consider giving to this program. If you've been blessed by it in any measure, even giving a couple of bucks makes a difference, because again, to fly people like Pete Hegseth and others out is obviously a cost, and we want to be able to continue to provide this service, not only for the people of Westgate Chapel, but for all of you that are outside of the body of Westgate Chapel. So please consider giving. Again, there's a QR code you can scan right now. There are little black boxes outside of the doors that you can drop an envelope or give cash to, and of course online at westgatechapel.com. Oh, one update that Ginny, our very own Ginny, told me about. If you are signing up for the FPIW Crisis in K-12 Education Workshop that's here at Westgate, the QR code on the handout is wrong. So if you just want to sign up for that, sign up at the table. November. So the next Apologia is going to be in November. We did have a speaker lined up, but unfortunately her schedule just didn't work with that date, so we are figuring out somebody else to come for the November session, which is only a more enticing incentive to make sure you sign up for our mailing list. Can you put the slide up? If you are not a part of the Apologia mailing list and you want to know when the November session is and who's going to be speaking, I would highly encourage you to sign up right now before we bring the guests out. With that, you're tired of seeing me. I want to hear more from Pete. I was going to say Seth, but his name is Pete Hegseth. Let's give a warm welcome for Pastor Alec and Pete Hegseth.
And the answer is no. We have vacations to plan. Thank you for all your questions. A lot of awesome questions that you sent in. I'd like to go back then to address some, have Pete address some of them by some of the questions, even though they may apply to the education subject. One of them is, I believe I heard Mike Pompeo state that he feels the worst threat against the United States is not Russia or China, but the head of the teachers union. Do you think this is accurate?
I agree, because I think you can't fight external foes if you don't believe in yourself. If you don't believe that where you live or the country you live in is worth defending. And teachers unions, if you watch episode 4 of season 2 of The Miseducation of America, or read it in the book, they are the front line of the ongoing attempts to drive a Marxist agenda into our kids' schools, which will ultimately cap us at the knees in our ability in the long term to fight foreign enemies. And so I believe that's the biggest threat we face is internal. Obviously, the Communist Chinese and their ambitions is a big problem, but we better have a future citizenry prepared to face them.
Yeah. One of the questions, who is the they? Just a long list of current-day Marxists or teachers' unions. And I think I can answer that. They need to read the book. Right?
There's a long list of they, and we name all the names in the book, yes.
Yeah. So in great detail, you go into great detail.
In great detail, from a suffragette that was used by the progressives to show an example, we talk about Kinsey, we talk about Dewey, we talk about Horace Mann, all of those names, and then into detail of what they did and why they did it.
Awesome. What about secondary education? Would you send your kids to Harvard, University of Washington?
No. I think I shared this last time, but for those of you that weren't here, I did go to graduate school at Harvard, and I did so foolishly because I was checking boxes like everybody else, like, oh, this is the most prestigious school, so I should go to it, and I knew that I wasn't learning anything. I mean that honestly. Like, I don't feel like I learned anything of usefulness there. It was the Kennedy School of Government, and I remember the first day there, I had 4 classes, none of which were about the environment. One was about business, all 4 of them used climate change as the example by which public policy should be used to advance a goal or an outcome. I should have ran out the door after the first day. And I just kind of like laughed at it and did my thing. But I felt for years, we hold these institutions up as the experts, as the leaders, as the best. And I felt like by attaching my name to that, I'm just perpetuating that view. It's just a Marxist camp. It should be renamed Critical Theory University. That's where the ideas emanate from the most. So finally, I had enough. And the last straw for me was when Harvard announced that their new head chaplain of their chapel was an atheist. Not kidding. A university founded to train Puritan ministers. So I went on Fox and Friends, live on the show. I grabbed my diploma, I cracked it open, and I pulled it out, took a Sharpie, and I crossed it out, and I said, "Return to sender." And I mailed it back to him. And I have not heard back from Harvard. But we have to stop viewing these institutions as elite. They're not elite. They're poisoning the minds of kids. The professors teach nonsense. Their standards are all gone. It's all about identity politics. And if I see someone applying for a job in a company I have, or if it says Harvard, you better give me 1,000 reasons why I should hire you, because my default is no, because I don't want what you're bringing in. So the list of schools I feel comfortable with my kids going to at this point is about this many. Now, you know your kids. Some kids are prepared to be in that spiritual and ideological warfare, to be salt and light. Princeton, where I went as an undergraduate, there's 25 conservative professors there. Robbie George, who's an amazing Christian conservative, has created a beachhead there of a James Madison program of American institutions and ideals. Like, you could go there as a Christian and a conservative and flourish and learn things and then be a part of that battle. Like, we should do that where we can. But I also know most kids go to college and follow the crowd. And following the crowd these days means following really bad ideas.
You mentioned earlier, and I totally agree, there are very few Christian universities, so-called Christian universities, that have not gone woke over the last 10 years. It's really sad.
It is, yeah. I mean, and you have to treat them basically like any other university, unless they're very intentional about cutting against the world.
What do you think about the media narrative around January 6th? Insurrection and the integrity of the 2020 election? You can take those in any order you choose.
I was actually there on January 6th. I was there for Fox and Friends covering that rally. And I remember that morning describing the crowd and the feeling there as a constitutional tinderbox. And I think I was correct. And I've never seen a mass of people move as quickly in one direction as they did. Of course, everyone ignores what Donald Trump actually said that day, which was peacefully and patriotically protest. I didn't. I was there. I heard it. So did everybody else. But ever since, it's been used as, I mean, you could see it happening in real time. This was going to be a moment that was leveraged by Democrats, by the bureaucratic state, to characterize Trump supporters or anyone who was there as domestic extremists, as threats to the republic, where emergencies should be declared, they need to be targeted. And ever since, you've seen it's meant to have a chilling effect, the reverberation of that. Look at the January 6th political prisoners who have not been given due process, who've been put in solitary confinement, who've been mischaracterized. I mean, people from middle America who walked into the Capitol, many without any physical resistance, who are now facing 8, 10, 12-year sentences. That is meant to signal to everybody else, don't show up next time there's a rally. Don't show up next time there's a protest. And then you contrast that with the summer of love that you guys experienced out here, or what happened in 2020 in the riots, with people not only getting away with it, but major politicians setting up bail funds to support them. That's the double standard in the two-tiered series of justice that is emblematic of January 6th. I'm not saying that everything that happened that day was good, but the characterization, I mean, you hear Democrats, you heard it in that hearing, say that this is worse than 9/11? Is that, oh yeah, that's been stated. Can you imagine uttering those words? Try that in downtown Manhattan. Well, they do. They elect them. People that say stuff like that. That's the worldview we're dealing with. I think as it pertains to 2020, there's just no doubt that if we actually had a fair press and fair social media that was willing to engage with the actual information that was available, Joe Biden would not be president of the United States right now. So you can talk about any aspect of election interference in fair elections, but there's just no doubt they used information control, they used COVID to change the way that we vote across this country. And it's a warning for 2024 that if we don't, thank goodness someone like Elon Musk bought Twitter, and it's not perfect, but it's different, and we got the Twitter files, and we got a better understanding. But 2024 is gonna be about a battle between voters and ballots. There's a big difference between voters and ballots. And there's a process by which ballot harvesting has now been made very legal in a lot of places. And Republicans, conservatives better get really good at legal ballot harvesting because we want to jump up and down and say we should all vote on election day, we should all vote in person, and that's great, and we should. But if you're up against a machine that can pull out low propensity voters because they know where to find them, and they pester them and pester them and pester them until they get that ballot, and they make sure it goes in one direction, and they look at it and go, okay, right person, handing it in, that's a whole different system that we're up against. So 2020 was a warning for what we'll be up against in 2024, and we better be full speed ahead on guarding that ballot box and watching it.
Have you got any thoughts at all on the number of times we've heard, this is the evidence we need, there was corruption in Arizona, this is going to go to court finally, this is what we've needed, only to have nothing, including, and again, man, I love what Mike Lindell is doing, going out on a limb like he has, but nothing ever seems to come of that.
Yeah, and none of them ever actually got a hearing. I mean, you remember the time frame of the moment between Election Day and the inauguration. It's what, less than 90 days. It's 70, 80 days. So you've got a political candidate contesting the results state by state with the headwind of his own party, with the headwind of the opposition party, with the headwind of the media, and ultimately the headwind of a lot of institutions. And so they did the best they could to prove what they could, where they could, to include thousands of sworn testimony of people that had examples of things where they had gone sideways. Yeah, it is really frustrating because I watch it even at the national level and it feels like it just dissipates. It feels like it's just, you see evidence or it's talked about and then it just kind of is set aside. Yeah. And I don't know how you get accountability or follow through on that other than individuals trying to. I think the best, and I don't mean to be discouraging about that, I think the best follow through for that would be a turnout like we've never seen in 2024 and a guarding of the ballot box in ways that we haven't before to get a chance to change, to change those elections. Remember, all the ways we voted were supposed to be because of the China virus. Right? That's how you have to change. But then they all became permanent. Those should be undone. Voter ID should be pushed everywhere in the country. It's just it's so simple. And it's actually really racist to suggest that certain people aren't able to get an ID. They're not capable of getting an. It's just the whole, or maybe they don't want IDs because 7 million people have come across the southern border. And their plan is to leverage that in the future. Now, I think they're a little ahead of their skis because I think a lot of those, well, it's a whole nother thing. I mean, a lot of Hispanics look at what's happening and they say, well, that doesn't represent who we are and the law and order that we want in our country and the legal way that we came here. So they're making a bargain that may not cut in their direction, but they're making everybody's life worse in the process.
Yeah. Any thoughts about the Ukraine-Russia engagement and what role, again, just to go back to your military experience, what do you see happening there, and is there a way out?
Well, what I see is Obama's in office and Putin takes Crimea. What I see is Trump's in office and Putin doesn't take anything. Honestly, you remember the statements that Trump said? He said them a few times. He said, well, it was the leader of the Taliban. He's meeting with the leader of the Taliban, or they're having discussions, and the leader of the Taliban looks at Donald Trump and says, why did you just give me a picture of my house? And Trump goes, I think you know why. I mean, Putin basically said the same thing. He said, you've said you would bomb the Kremlin if we do this. And Trump goes, I don't know if he believed me, but all he has to do is believe me about 5% of the time, and it's going to hold him back. I mean, asserting power has a currency in a realpolitik world that dictators and strongmen understand. And all they do is look at Joe Biden and see sheer weakness. And so, of course, if you're Vladimir Putin, you make your move. And then the response has been terrible. I mean, we were all trying to get our footing around what it meant when it first happened. And you'd love to see the Ukrainian people repel foreign invaders. Great. At the beginning, the administration said things like, well, we don't want to give them all this equipment because it will escalate and lead to World War III. And now we've given them all of that equipment with the potentiality of it escalating to World War III. We've got Zelensky talking about hitting targets inside Russia, wanting more advanced weaponry. And the argument for those who wanted to extend the Ukrainian war for a long time was, well, Putin's going to Poland, Putin's going to Eastern Europe. And does anyone believe that Vladimir Putin and his army that couldn't even take Kiev is going to Poland, is going to Germany? No, this is a moment where if Ukraine wants to maintain its sovereignty, A, it needs to defend itself, and B, Europe needs to have its back if it's a real continent with a real military capability. And this is where Trump was always right about NATO. We helped you win a world war, we built a defense alliance, and that's a really special and important thing. But then you guys all got your militaries, and you opened your borders, and you got your militaries to pay for your welfare states, and you all basically became giant museums. And now you want us to defend you in perpetuity? Like, no thank you. Either step up or continue to be as irrelevant as you already are. When I was in Afghanistan, we wore patches. They were NATO patches. And what was the, ISAF was the name of the coalition. It was the International Stability Assistance Force. And we all wore it on our shoulders, every country. The US, France, Australia, Canada. And the joke is that the ISAF patch actually stood for, I saw Americans fighting. Because if you go to the headquarters, which I did many times in Kabul, there were 50 flags flying at the of this giant alliance in Afghanistan, and there was one country doing the lifting. And I knew some great Australian soldiers, some great British soldiers, some great Canadian soldiers. They wanted to fight, but their political prerogatives back home basically told them that they couldn't. They couldn't leave the base, they couldn't shoot their weapons, they couldn't be, all these. What good is a military alliance where no one else fights? It's not a real thing. And so either Europe steps up or we're spending all this time and all this energy and all this money defending the legacy of a war that we helped win, but it doesn't actually make us any more secure. Like, the communist Chinese really want to take over the world. And they're building an economy and a military and indebting other nations in order to do so. And we're fighting the last war on the wrong continent and then funding the Ukrainians trying to take back all of their territory. Donald Trump said he'll come in and negotiate a settlement, and that's what it should be at this point. There shouldn't be, obviously, no Americans and no more American money going to fund that fight right there, right now.
Any thoughts that you care to share about 2024?
Well, I don't really hide my political persuasion and the candidate that I like. I mean, I'd like to see Donald Trump back in the White House. I've been clear about that. I like Ron DeSantis. I like Vivek Ramaswamy. I appreciate, so I don't mean to be disparaging of anybody else. But if you told me they would all get in the race, Trump would be indicted 4 times on 91 counts, and the latest Fox News poll would have him up by 50 points in the Republican primary, I'd say it might be time for the other candidates to bow out. The problem is that, twofold. One, for Ron DeSantis, is he was the prohibitive frontrunner running in 2028 if he didn't make this run right now. And I think, unfortunately, he's damaged his chances even then. And I think the other flawed nature of the other Republicans running right now is that the only rationale for them running this far behind is that they're hoping the indictments will work. I mean, there's no other path. There's no other change in the electorate of the Republican Party that's going to suddenly sweep in Nikki Haley. And I like her, but it's not going to happen. So they're hoping for or believing that there'll be a cratering of support based on the lawfare against Donald Trump. Yet the electorate looks out and sees what's going on and why they're targeting him, and so his support only swells. I think on the Democrat side, I think Joe Biden's probably going to run again. We did a whole, Will Cain and I did a whole segment off the wall this morning about it. Like, they'd have to move really quick if they wanted to replace him, unless the plan was to run all the way to the convention and then resign and release your delegates and try to give them to somebody else, which they could do if they want to, but that would lead to a lot of chaos. You've got Gavin Newsom just flying around waiting to land his plane. He obviously wants to be the nominee. I just think you can't underestimate the grip on power that people have once they have it and the desire to not give it up. From Joe to Jill to all the staffers, which are basically Obama 3.0, and they want to complete the work that they've started since 2008, and they control the DNC, they control the process, the media covers for them. I mean, if there was ever a Republican in the condition of Joe Biden, I mean, it would be 25th Amendment all day long, nonstop. It even was for Donald Trump. And you saw the interviews Trump's done recently. I mean, the guy can go for 1 hour, 2 hour, and not stop. And Joe Biden can't do 3 sentences. And it's sad for the state of our country, but it shows you they have no bench and they love power. And that leads me to believe they'll go from the basement strategy to the beach house strategy, and they'll just hide him as long as they can.
It's a perfect storm, isn't it? We're in a perfect storm. Talk to us a little bit about Fox News, and I obviously want you to be as careful. Yeah, Reed is prompting me from the front row. You obviously have to be careful. But a lot of the ultra-conservatives are telling everybody, don't watch Fox News. They've turned. So what can you tell us about Fox News? I mean, obviously, you're on.
Yeah. Well, if you look at the front cover of my book, I mean, the guy who's blurbing it right at the bottom is Tucker Carlson. I mean, I love Tucker. He's a dear friend. And I'm obviously not going to comment on that, and there's reasons above my pay grade, and things happen. All I know is I'm grateful to Fox for the platform they've afforded me. They've never once told me what I can or cannot say. They've never once said, you can't put that on Fox Nation, or you can't write that book, or you can't talk about your faith, or you can't talk about a candidate, or you can't talk about your views. And anywhere I worked in the realm of information and media, were that to be the case, it would no longer be time for me to be there. So I'm grateful to work with people like Will Cain and Rachel Campos-Duffy on our weekend show, and to say what we believe, unafraid, without hedging or hemming or hawing about it, and to have a place like Fox that has our back in doing so. Is any company perfect? No. Like, I mean, no church is perfect. No institution is perfect. We live on planet Earth. But I think, and I understand people will choose different things and go other places. But I think as it pertains to this cycle and where we are, I'm going to use where I'm at to fight back. And no one has once said otherwise to me or anybody else. And there's a lot of wonderful people that work at Fox, God-fearing people who care about the country and care about the future of our kids. And buckle up, it's going to be a really interesting 13 months. Yeah. In our country and in the world of media, we're looking at indictments and impeachments and felony charges and, gun charges that are sham charges, and how it all plays out. Debates happen, do they not happen? We're gonna have to, in an era of lies, the most radical thing you can do, as many have said, is tell the truth. And that's what I try to do as best I can, and I'm grateful for a place that allows me to do that.
Well, I don't know of another cable network that you can go to. Fortunately, since COVID, we've had a number of news outlets open up that are alternatives to CNN or MSNBC. So I think we're fortunate, really, in the last 5 or 6 years, to have a pretty wide range of places where we can get our news. But I don't know of another national network like Fox, where you've got people like Harris Faulkner and others who are not only seem to be doing what you've just said you've got the liberty to do, but also to be very free about their faith, which is wonderfully encouraging to people like us, that there are folks who are unashamed of their faith and will speak freely of it. So that's really encouraging.
Absolutely. Listen to how Ainsley Earhardt talks, or Kayleigh McEnany, or Harris. or others. I mean, faith is embraced and appreciated and welcomed along with patriotism. I mean, we do the national anthem before our show every Saturday and every Sunday. Because I grew up in a small town in Minnesota. I live in a small town in Tennessee right now. We talk about politics all the time, and the things that matter the most to you and to me are not those things. You know, it's my relationship with my Lord and Savior. It's my kids and their future. It's what I teach them. It's what they learn. It's our family. Those are the things we can actually control right now. And so, like you, I feel helpless sometimes too, even with a microphone, to say, how does this all play out? But Fox has been wonderful about allowing hosts to speak openly and honestly about their faith, about their family, about their love of country, in a place where, I mean, where are you going to get it? And I mean, it's MSNBC, CNN, NBC, ABC, CBS. I know there are other networks that do it too, and I love that. I love competition. I think there should be other people out there on our side of the aisle talking more and talking boldly. I think that's great. But when it comes to the 800-pound gorillas, we're going to need Fox strong and truthful in this election season. And thankfully, we beat the other guys in ratings, and let's hope we continue to.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about the globalists. What kind of a threat do you see all the globalists being to us right now?
It's a huge threat. You can think of it as some far-reaching problem from elsewhere, but it is the international institutions that drive the meetings of elites in various places that drive the discussion of where money gets pushed and how decisions get made, eventually trickle their way into our government. I mean, a globalist believes there should be no borders. I mean, that's what George Soros effectively believes. That's what the Open Society is. That's the policy of our current administration, effectively, is that the only border that matters is the Ukrainian border, not the southern border. It drives where money is spent. It drives where priorities go. Globalists have very effectively used an issue like climate change, which used to be global warming, and then it was global cooling, and now it's climate change. And whether it's hot, cold, raining, or snowing, or dry, it's always our fault. And we need to alter every single part of our life to include impoverishing ourselves and others who never had a chance to develop their economies in service of something that's not scientifically proven at all, and only meant to enrich a small group of people who control the whole global conversation and the whole pipeline. So we're going to put auto workers out of a job so that we can mine for minerals in China and get a cheap electric car that you can't plug in because there's no stations. And then when you do, you overload the grid, and then you feed that grid with fossil fuels that you were trying to get rid of in the first place. You judge something like that by a perfect globalist standard, which is no matter what, they win, you lose. And they can never prove it, but they don't have to prove it. And then they light the next generation of kids' hair on fire and make them think that the world's going to end in 8 years or 6 years. And it creates an alternate religion for them beyond their identity. To say, I'm a climate activist, that's who I am, that's what I represent, but I'm so pessimistic I'm not going to have kids, because who would want to bring kids up into this world? So and then, you can add vaccines as a level on top of all of that. It's not conspiratorial to understand how many of our bad ideas emanate from international institutions. They have for a very long time, that of wealthy people who live by different rules than we do, don't care about our country, certainly never have, and would like to find ways to weaken America, because a strong America means the globalists can take over institutions and push their prerogatives even more. They would love to see a world government where they control what we do. A strong America stops that. And so that's why they work in such an anti-American fashion. I mean, we should chop the UN off of Manhattan and just let it float away.
Yeah. One last question before the really final question, which is, where do you get your socks? That was in there. But before we get to socks, those of us who kind of study the news and what's going on have been interested in the Texas Attorney General and the battle that he's been in. And I think, if I remember correctly, you were talking about that this morning on your show. Mm-hmm. Talk to us a little bit about that and the significance of his acquittal.
Yeah, we had his attorney on our show this morning. Here's the thing. I don't know all the ins and outs of every aspect of what he's accused of. I do know that two groups of people wanted him gone and wanted him gone bad. And that was the Democrats in Texas and the rhinos in Texas. And between the two of them, they were able to create enough smoke and enough dust. And maybe there were some things that were untoward or were not correct. I don't know every part of it, so I'm not here to defend every aspect of who Ken Paxton is or the decisions that he's made. But they came together to say, we need to get rid of this guy, which usually is a sign that this guy's over the target on the types of lawsuits and things he's willing to execute on behalf of the people of the state of Texas. And so the House of Representatives in Texas was able to bring a combination of Democrats and effectively Bush Republicans because there's a big war still in Texas over those power centers of who controls the Republican Party. It's amazing how hard, the Bushes and the Cheneys and others will fight to try to maintain power inside the Republican Party. And I met George Bush. I think he's a good guy. I don't mean to disparage him in every way, but he obviously has a different view of the threats we face in this country today than what Donald Trump has stirred so many people into action for. So the House passed the impeachment, and it went to the Senate, in the Texas Senate, where there was an actual trial. And that's what Ken Paxton's attorney pointed out to me this morning. There were a lot of accusations, there were a lot of bills. Once the trial occurred where people had to go under oath in front of the Texas Senate and stand by the accusations that were made, the case fell apart. And there was a big pressure campaign on Republican senators there, and ultimately they didn't get anywhere close to the number they needed to impeach Ken Paxton. And I love the statement that he put out right after that. He's like, buckle up, Washington, here we go. It's one thing, if you're gonna, well, this is not quite the king, but if you're gonna shoot at the king, you better not miss. And that's not that's Ken Paxton per se, but he's ready to go after the illegal actions of the Biden administration from the state of Texas, and I think that's what they need.
Yeah. Pete, I think I speak for many of us, and I know many of you don't go to Westgate Chapel, and we're just delighted that you're here and that this has some meaning and significance for you when we do this. But I just want you to know how encouraging it is to me and to Rita, the two of us, to know that there's somebody like yourself who holds the values that you do, holds the faith that you do, and God has given a national platform so that you can speak out boldly like you do. And we just want to say thank you for giving us hope for what's happening in the country.
Well,
thank you.
Pastor, I want to thank you. I want to thank this church. I want to thank all of you. And I will tell you that when we go into that one little square block of sanity on the island of Manhattan, the little headquarters of Fox News there, I never worry one bit about what all the newspapers say or all the people there say. I always draw from and remember crowds like this, folks like this, who come from places where I came from, who love the Lord and love the country. And I should quit at my job at any point if I can't, as boldly as possible, say the truth from where I am, because I have an easy job. No, I have an easy job compared to most people. And I'll close with this. Because my job is to give an opinion and then get blowback for that opinion, or have other people like or not like that opinion. It's a whole nother ball game if you're a law enforcement officer, or you're a teacher, or you're a nurse, or you're a line worker, or you're a pastor, or where your job is something else, but you want to live in a country a free country where you can speak freely without threat of prosecution or cancellation or being fired. You don't live in a free country if you can't say with your mouth what you think with your mind or believe with your heart. And we're at a place where they want that for people so that they back down and so that they don't speak. So I'm encouraged by you and what you do inside that environment. And I promise you I will do everything I can to speak as loudly as I can to blow open the conversation so everybody can talk that way. That's my goal. So God bless you all. Thank you so much. So much.
Thank you. Before you head out and try to beat everyone else to the parking lot, we live as believers, we live in a tension. And the tension is in a representative republic. We have the privilege of doing something about these issues that Pete has articulated so well. We have the privilege and the responsibility. And as a believer, I believe your vote and your engagement is a stewardship that God has entrusted you with, just like your tithe that belongs to your local church. Your stewardship of these things belongs to the nation where God has put you. It's not an option for Christians. But the tension we face is this, that the future of this country, which seems to be more in jeopardy today than when I landed here on a freighter in 1966 from South Africa to go to Bible college here, more in jeopardy now than ever in the years that I've grown up and been blessed by this nation. And the future of this nation is only in one person's hands, right? While we fight for the White House, while we fight for who represents us in Olympia, while we do everything we can to get Nick Jenkins onto the Edmonds, everything and every opportunity that we can, the bottom line is that unless we have a heaven-sent outpouring of the Holy Spirit that wakes Christians up in this country to biblical morality and biblical issues, it doesn't matter who we have in the White House or any place else. We're not going to survive. So I want to recommend a book to you. It's written in 1908. It's out of print, but you can maybe find copies. But it's called England Before and After Wesley. And the first third of the book chronicles the deplorable state in the culture in Great Britain before the First Great Awakening. The middle third of the book talks about the impact of the First Great Awakening. And the last third of the book traces by family names the people who came alive spiritually in that First Great Awakening and who changed the culture. Child labor laws abolished, prison reform enacted, slavery finally abolished. Wilberforce was directly impacted by, in fact, on his deathbed, John Wesley said to Wilberforce, please, and he was a young man when John Wesley died. Wilberforce was a young man. Don't give up the fight. Stay in the fight. So as believers, frankly, it's the reason that I haven't retired yet and stepped aside, because right now the battle is too intense. And to waver in the battle right now, I believe, is spiritual cowardice. So let's stay engaged, but let's also keep our eyes on the only one who can truly turn this nation around. Amen. God bless you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.